This is an SABC News presentation.
Hello, molweni emakhaya nakwindawo ngendawo enibukeleni kuzo. Welcome to this week's episode of Yilungelo Lakho. It's your right. Sisasaza ngqo ke ku SABC 1 Mzansi for sure. Igama Sisanda Jonas. Sicela ke niphawule ukuba inkqubo yanamhlanje yeshicilelweyo koko sokwazi ukuthatha iminxeba yenu njengesiqhelo. Kodwa ke usenokuvakalisa izimvo zakho ngokusithumelela i-email ku consumer@sabc.co.za okanye usindwendwele kwi-Facebook page yethu ethi Yilungelo Lakho okanye usithumelele i-tweet ku @yilungelo. It has been 5 years since the National Credit Act was launched and just over a year after the Consumer Protection Act came into force. Both pieces of legislation promise consumers a strengthened protection of their rights. Dedicated agencies and other bodies were set up to protect and enforce these rights. But it would seem turning these rights into a reality in the lives of consumers still remains a challenge.
The level of consumer rights awareness remains a problem. Often consumers do not know where their rights and responsibilities begin and end. The system put in place to protect their rights and to assist in dealing with their complaints are in most cases not easily understood. Neither do they find the process user-friendly. It is not uncommon to find consumers not knowing where and how to lodge complaints. While efforts are made to educate consumers on their rights, it will seem this has had little impact. More and more consumers continue to entangle themselves in dodgy contracts, overborrow, inability to save and still spend recklessly. As a result, several thousands are on the credit bureau blacklist and others have to seek the help of debt counselors. The capacity of some dedicated consumers' rights organization is dealing with consumers' complaints has also been questioned. Consumer complaints about these organizations include process of lodging complaints that are not easy, a slow processing of complaints, and poor or a lack of responsiveness. Some businesses have been accused of non-compliance with consumers' rights laws and the exploitation of consumers. With these and other challenges, the question is, what is required to make consumer rights a reality to South Africans? How can the good intentions and the laws so well articulated on paper be felt by consumers?
And to answer these questions, let me extend a warm welcome to Phumeza Mlungu. She is the Chief Director at the National Consumer Commission. Samkele ke no Thami Bolani, yena usihlalo wombutho olwela amalungelo abathengi i-Consumer Fair. And lastly, we welcome Jacqueline Boucher, yena oyi-legal advisor with National Credit Regulator. Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to the program. Maybe just as a point of departure, manqale ngawe ke sisiphumeza usichazele buphuma phina into enzayibuza ke kuni nonke that you introduce where you come from, and ndiqale ngawe ke sisiphumeza.
Enkosi kakhulu Sisanda for inviting us today. Ndiphuma kwi-office ekuthiwa National Consumer Commission. We are responsible for protecting amalungelo wabathengi, which is consumer rights. Specifically, umthetho is responsible for wona is called the Consumer Protection Act. It is amalungelo ayi-8 abathengi athi abathengi also mashishini fanele bawa respect xa umthengi ethe wayothenga noba into nayivenkileni.
Alright, sizakwazi ukuthi ke sithethe kabanzi ngalo mithetho. Uthami sikwazi ukuphuma ku-Consumer Forum ngoku it's Consumer Fair. Sichazele wena uphuma phi kutheni seyi-Consumer Fair and your mandate.
Yeah, i-National Consumer Forum isishintshe igama yaba yi-Consumer Fair. Ngenxa yokuthi abantu abaningi basiconfuse bacabanga ukuthi siyi-part of i-government. Ngoba phela sekhona ke ama-commissions amaningi, ama-consumer commissions, kukhona i-National Consumer Commission, National Consumer Tribunal, National Credit Regulator, so people think we're part of government. Ingakho sishintshe i-identity ye-organization. But i-Consumer Fair isiyaqhubeka nokwenza umsebenzi obiwenza as a National Consumer Forum okuvikela belungelo abathengi.
Jacqueline?
The National Credit Regulator has been established to protect consumers who apply for credit. Credit providers who grant credit need to comply. Mainly our mandate is to obviously enforce the National Credit Act, which you have said came into effect 5 years ago, and just to make sure that the credit market is fair and accessible and transparent.
Your observations, I suppose, because we have all these bodies, we have all these laws that have been set up. What has changed for consumers?
A lot has changed for consumers because, for starters, consumer rights were just, they were not legislated. They were not mandatory for business to uphold. Because of the introduction of the legislation, they've become mandatory. That's the first step. But the enforcement of the legislation does not come without challenges. As enforcers, we must take this piece of legislation, translate it into a language that is understood by a normal man on the street. We have to make sure that people know we are accessible, people can get us where we are. We have to make sure that abakule field sikuyo like ezinye agencies nezinye NGOs ezikhoyo ukwenza into ba sihambise ivangeli ye-consumer protection phambili.
Buthami, consumer fair nina niyibona njani yonke lento abathengi xa besiza kuni ngaba bayayiqonda lento ba inlo hlobo ifanele bingalo na?
Yeah, I think the legislation right njengamanje Credit Act, Consumer Protection Act namanye. The problem enkulu ukuthi asenze education eyanele. We're not reaching consumers out there, especially in the townships and other disadvantaged areas. And if we have legislation good, we have NCC, we have NCR and other organizations, but you don't reach to people, then people will not benefit from that legislation. And in the understanding, consumer protection starts with education. It starts with knowledgeable consumers. If I'm not knowledgeable, I cannot benefit from this legislation. And so the biggest challenge that we face as a country is to educate our people. The trick is in education.
NCR's mandate is also to educate people, amongst other things that you are supposed to do for consumers. How are you practically doing this as NCR?
The NCR actually engages on various levels. It is known that our offices are here in Johannesburg, and it is, we can't reach all the provinces at once, but therefore we have radio stations which we engage in the local and the regional. We come on TV, on national and local TV. We are in print media. We've also engaged in various things where, for free to the consumers, we will go to any province. We engage with the tribal leaders, and we'll go and educate them. We've also recently engaged with the Department of Education, where the credit rights for South Africans have been included into the grade 11 curriculum. So that will be going forth. So, that would be a great step to start educating our children from a young age, so that by the time that they are credit worthy, they already know their rights. So I think we do engage on very different levels. On all civil services pay slips every month, we put out a credit message on how to manage your credit. Obviously, consumer education, you're going to have to go far lengths, and it will be a task that you'll have to tackle head on all the time, because as the fellow speakers have said, education, without knowing your rights, how are you going to enforce them?
All right. Are you visible? Abantu bayanibona na nomsebenzi eniwenzayo?
As a commission, you would remember we were born last year. We are now 18 months in existence. To a large extent, I would say we've done pretty much well for a new baby on the block, a new kid on the block. We've managed to raise the awareness through imedia kakhulu besisebenzisa, where we took stock in the last financial year, starting market strong ukuthi sirichebani na in terms of us coming on TV, going on radio, in newspaper articles as it is published, or where we give interviews as such. So for Masuba, it's well over 22 million esikwazi loba reach abantu. But umbuzo ke ngokuthi njengoba sine act yethu ithi we need to be pay attention to aba vulnerable. which is in the rural areas, seniors, minors, and people living with disadvantages. How did we fare as far as that is concerned? Because when we look at ourselves, glonyaka losses in existence now, siyafumana sindoba ikakhulu siyasa concentrate kwi-urban consumer. Iyo ikakhulu ne-complaints zethu. Currently ngoku, I think we see around, for the last financial year, we received about 16,000 complaints, but still profiling yayo, it's people mainly in the urban areas. So we need to change that going forward to say, how are we reaching the vulnerable
We'll talk
consumer?
more actually on how you plan to tackle that issue. For now, makhe sicibele evenkileni kodwa ke phambi koko senze oko mandithi ndinikhumbuze ukuba ke you can take part in this show by sending us an email to consumer@sabc.co.za. ungasindwendwela nakwi-Facebook page yethu ethi Yilungelo Lakho okanye usithumelele i-tweet ku@Yilungelo. Please join us after this. Siphinde ke sinamkele babukeli usabukele inkqubo Yilungelo Lakho, it's your right. Sisashukuxa ke umba wokuba ilutho kangakanani na kubathenga imithetho ekhusela amalungelo abo kwaye ngawaphi na amagingxigingxi athintela ukhuseleko lwabathengi. Njengoko inkqubo yethu ke namhlanje ishicelelwe, ungasithumelela i-email ku-consumer@sabc.co.za ukuvakalisa izimvo zakho okanye usindwendwele kwi-Facebook page yethu ethi Yilungelo Lakho okanye usithumelele i-tweet ku@Yilungelo. Earlier on, you did touch on the fact that you were engaging with the Department of Education. I just wanted to go back to that point in maybe finding out the response from the department, how they found what you proposed to them.
Well, what we've done is that the information has already been put into the curriculum. So in the focus books for the grade 11s, we all applied our minds internally as to what we thought would be relevant to a school-going child. What information we need to equip them with before they enter into the market. So it's already been added and it should be added into the curriculum on next year.
Buthami ngenye indlela lena ezakwazi ukwenza abantu bawazi amalungelo abo niyibona into enjani and into ekufanele bayenziwe even more so that people really understand their rights.
No, siyayisupporta le nto bayenzile. Nathi kudala sisho ukuthi kufanele sitarget abantwana besebancane so that bakhule nawo lama skills so that the time bama-consumers besebenza bayazi ukuthi yini kufanele bayenze. Kodwa iproblem enkulu engiyibonayo mina ukuthi i-government icabanga ukuthi le nto bangayiachieve besebenza bodwa. Angeke bakwazi ukwenza lokho. Kufanele ukuthi uma befuna ukuthi si-reach abantu sikwazi ukuthi siba-empowerish, kufanele ukuthi i-government isebenze nama-NGOs, isebenze nama-NPOs and other consumer organizations. And that's where the problem is. Uthola ukuthi kunama-island i-government ibithi mina ngenza ukuthi nalabantu benza ke into abayithandayo. If singezo cooperate, it's going to take us another 100 years to empower consumers in South Africa. So that's the one thing. Two, kuna problem ukuthi wona lama government agencies cooperate. Uthola ukuthi le yenza lokhu enye yenza ukuthi uthola ukuthi kuna duplication of services. Uthola ukuthi ngalo ndlela imali iyawasteka because lenye agency ayazi ukuthi lenye agency yenzani. So kufanele ukuthi bekhona a national strategy. So okay, we've got all these agencies, FSB, you name them. But there must be a national strategy so guide all these agencies and NGOs ukuthi if sifuna uku-empowerish ama-consumers in South Africa, what is it that we need? What are the resources that are needed? Then I think we'll be on the road to success.
So Phumeza wena ungathini kanye kule nto ithethwa nguBhuthami?
Ndiyayisupporta kakhulu ingcamango kaBhuthami. I just also want to highlight ukuthi government did take to consideration the fact that we need community-based organizations to take a message of consumer rights to within their communities, because the Act it obligates us to establish and accredit what we call consumer protection groups. These are the groups that we foresee will be within communities that would act as a first port of call for consumers. Let's say I'm sitting somewhere in Mdantsane and then the NCC is based in Pretoria. How do I get a speedy redress without me going all the way? If the consumer protection groups are there in Mdantsane, a consumer from NU17 or from NU5 can go to that consumer protection group and say, this is what I experienced yesterday. is it in line with the Consumer Protection Act? And then that would be the first line of defense of the consumer. We're looking at even supporting those consumer protection groups to be sustainable and in terms of capacity to be able to render these services. Uyakhumbula uba ndithe siqala usebenza ngonyaka kupheleyo sikhona umgama wesesiwuhambile into esiyenzileyo okokuqala siye sahamba province to province sathi let's just assess what is happening as far as these organizations on the ground.
Yes.
Safumanisa uba okay zikhona on the ground but ziyastrugglisha financially. Sustainability yakhona it's not very strong. And they have to do a lot of things to make sure that they keep going. So, focus your consumer. They're not really consumer focused. There's labor issues, there's issues with divorce, and all those things that they handle so that they can become sustainable. So, how do we then change the focus so that they include the issues of the consumer protection and become knowledgeable? And then we found out because this is a new legislation, the level of understanding might not be at the level where they will be able to assist within communities. Say for a couple that are specific that were in the business of consumer protection for longer. So we want to make sure that in terms of capacity they understand the act. Hence we started discussions with the Vets School of Law to say let's come up with a course. This course is going to be instrumental in capacitating the consumer protection groups. Take them through that course and take the course becomes incremental in its approach. Because if you are an NGO or consumer protection group within a community, you can go and get your 5-day certificate to sharpen your skills in the understanding of the consumer protection.
It was just within the urban areas, but
ngendlela kakhulu esicinga into ba bona i-consumer protection groups kazikhona pha on the ground they will be able to reach abantu ke ngoku abantu will have the access and will understand the concept of consumer rights more than us doing it alone.
All right. Jacqueline, within the NCR, maybe let's just look at the Act itself and what it's supposed to do for consumers, the National Credit Act.
The National Credit Act is there. It does give a lot of consumer rights in terms of right to apply for credit, right to have credit in the language of your choice, the contracts. That contracts are clear and understandable, that all the costs involved in the credit is explained to you up front or is disclosed up front. So transparency is very important. Debt counselling is a right that has been established in terms of the National Credit Act. And then there are certain things such as enforcement steps and how a credit provider needs to notify you that you're in arrears before they can take action against you.
All right. But Tami, ezinye izinto ziye zibengathi ziya-overlap and uba kuqonda kwamna kwi-NCA kunye ne-Consumer Protection Act maybe ke mhlawumbi nawe ungasichazela ke Consumer Protection Act yona ifanele uba yenzela abathengi intoni na?
Kusho ukuthi i-Consumer Protection Act ensures supported because you're not responsible for it. I-protect amalungelo abantu ikakhulukazi intweni zemoto ukudla njenge-financial services zingaphansi kwe-Financial Services Board kanti into ze-credit zingaphansi kwe-National Credit Act. But the problem ukuthi an ordinary consumer does not understand those things. They know about the Consumer Commission, so they take all their problems to the Consumer Commission. And if they cannot access them, because it's been so difficult to access them,
then they can come to you.
Then they come to us. You know, I mean, I've had a situation where people phone me and say, look, I can't access any government agency. Can I pay you to solve my problem? And you cannot do that. And now if Tina would do consumer complaints, we're already duplicating what they are doing. And Tina is a small organization, our resources are limited. So that is the problem. Then we have the other problem of the provincial consumer affairs offices. Some have set up consumer courts, but they're not functioning. And there's nobody saying anything. That is why I'm saying we need a national strategy around the issues of consumer protection in the country. Otherwise, 10 years from now, we'll still be saying the same things.
All right. Even doing NCCSA.
I'm first to acknowledge that this is something that does not sit well with us. We want to be accessible to people. We want people to derive benefit from government services. And we want to be people to feel us, and we take our work very seriously. Hence, as I'm speaking to you right now, we are looking at establishing systems for e-call center because previously we didn't have a call center, hence so many problems of accessibility. We want we are looking at the website yet so that we put in relevant information, so that even if you are an urban consumer, you don't want, I'm not reaching you physically, you can tap into the internet and be able to read and understand more on your rights, and even be able to lodge a complaint. We are also in the process of establishing a case management system so that we can move speedily in terms of resolving the complaints. So it's something that we are working on.
All right. Ndifuna ukubuza ke ngoku kuwe ngoba into lena nani benikhe nayichaphazela ndithe xa ndijonga kwi-website yenu ndafika kukho umbuzo othi abantu baya kwi-NCC xa kutheni baye kwi-NCR xa kutheni.
Nangu umahluko phakathi kwethu ne-NCR. Masithi ungumthengi uyahamba uyothenga i-TV. Xa uyothenga i-TV ufumana i-TV which is the actual product. Ngapha wenze i-credit agreement. So masithi ke ngoku apha ekuthengeni kwakho uthe wafumana into ba you are not getting any joy from i-TV yakho. Uyophuka, they don't want to fix it, okanye by deliver bathini. You come to the NCC because we are talking about the actual product, which is the TV. Let's say the problem is with the credit agreement side. Then where do you go? You go to the NCR. So it's flip side of the same coin.
Can I come in this?
All right, yes, please do.
You see, that's why I was talking about the national strategy, because then you'll set up a national consumer protection call center. One number that every South African knows. So whatever consumer problem I have, I phone that number. And somebody sitting in that national call center will then say, no, your problem belongs to the NCR, and then direct your call to the NCR. Now the problem is that people don't know who to phone. Somebody who's a vendor phones the NCF, said, no, phonela a consumer commission. Consumer commission says, no, it's not our problem, phonela NCR. And so you find people get frustrated and they lose a lot of money in the process. So establish a national call center for consumer protection.
Jacqueline, are these some of the issues that come through to your offices?
You know, what we've experienced is obviously one thing is that consumers don't know where to complain. And how we have approached it as the NCR until something, you know, greater and bigger comes into the picture is we don't actually treat our call center as a call center. It's not someone that's just answering a call. It's actually a contact center, and we equip the staff that work there to say, we get in different organizations to come and train our staff and say, this is our mandate.
Yes.
So when they get a call, they know exactly who to refer the consumer to. So they get constant training. So until something different happens, we take responsibility of it so that our people can give, you know, the consumers the correct advice. So because it's very frustrating to go from one organization to the next and to the next. And then at the end of the day, consumers don't want to complain because they're not getting redress. So as an organization, you need to take ownership of that and say, let's equip our staff to make sure that we give the adequate information so that they know exactly who to refer the consumers to.
All right. Okwangoku masijikele evenkileni. Please join us after this ad break. Welcome back. Ngaphambi kokuba ke siqhubeke ingxoxo yethu sicela ke nikhumbule ukuba namhlanje inkqubo yeshicilelweyo koko asokwazi ke ukuthatha iminxeba yenu kodwa ningavakalisa izimvo zenu ngokusithumelela ke email ku consumer@sabc.co.za okanye ke ninxibelane nathi kwi Facebook page yethu @Yilungelo Lakho okanye nisithumelele tweet ku @Yilungelo. Before we went to our ad break, we touched on the fact that people don't know who to complain to. And that's quite a concern, actually. And also, then, how to complain, how to lodge that complaint. Maybe let me start with the NCR in terms of your processes.
Well, our processes are that we have our contact center, which will take calls. They will either try and assist a consumer online or on the phone call on giving them adequate advice. May it be something, am I being overcharged interest, or you know, just general questions. If they believe that is something that needs to be investigated, we always ask consumers to put it in writing. Now, the mediums we use is obviously email, we use post, and we use fax. And then we also use walk-in system where we have dedicated staff that assist any consumer that walks in to take their complaint and to either assist them to resolve it there and then or to obviously capture it so that we can investigate it further.
We consumer fair, Butami?
Well, before we established a consumer commission, we used to do consumer complaints. We don't deal with consumer complaints anymore. We simply do referrals. But Tina, as a consumer group, we are not very bureaucratic. If somebody phones, for instance, from Twendo or Kwamashu in KZN and says, I've got a problem with baby formula, I must be knowing somebody in the top leadership of Nestle, and I pick up a phone and I phone that person and I say, please address that problem. There's a gentleman who wanted a loan to buy a piece of land in Limpopo about 2 months ago. They couldn't give him the loan, so I phoned the bank because they knew the people have been dealing with them for years. And I said, well, this is a credit-worthy person. I know him. I can vouch for him. Please address this problem. So we don't deal with forms a lot and things like that. If people give us information, we look at it. If we think it's a good case, we then phone and help people. But because of our limited resources, we're now stopping the process, and we say government has created NCC, has created NCR. Let these organizations deal with those things. Tina, we're going to focus on advocacy work and consumer education.
All right, if feedback abantu anything bancede.
Well, look, I think we're more visible than many of the organizations. I mean, every morning I speak on radio to more than 2 million people. We've been doing it for the past 7 years. Most of the feedback is good, but work can still be improved so that consumers can benefit. But what I'm saying, and this is my strongest point because I've been in this thing for more than 10 years, as if phone a national strategy, have a single center where people can all phone and be given information and be assisted. I'm sure people will be empowered in this country.
Ndiyavuya that you are here and you're saying exactly that because you're saying you've been doing this for quite some time.
Correct.
Nike ngurhulumente ekubeni lento uyithethayo niyibona isenzeka.
Well, person's kati umuntu uyayithetha le nto but uyayikhanto revolutionary. Yazi South Africa umusho into abangahambelani nayo then start to label you. But the truth of the matter is that if, let's say, they appoint a new consumer commissioner, it will be good if that consumer commissioner sits with all the agencies and develop that national strategy and get NGOs and consumer organizations to be part of that process. Again, this thing will also contribute to job creation. We have a major problem with job employment here in this country. Take, for instance, if we were to accredit these consumer protection agencies in many parts of the country, a lot of people will be able to get jobs and do good work for communities where they come from.
The NCC, in terms of their processes when one wants to lodge a complaint?
We've got a complaint form that people can fill in. They can come to the commission in person. They can email, they can fax. If it's a person that we take down the complaint for them. And they can also, fax and do all the electronic fax, email. They can also call the lines that are available right now and get some kind of self-help advice and how to take the matter forward if it's not an issue that needs to come to the commission.
All right. Ndifuna ukhe ndiye ke kwi-issue yokubana niye nijonge ingxaki ezifana nezithini na. Umzekelo othe wasinika wona kuqala ngokuba uthenge i-TV wasichazela nina ke nizawujonga ukuba isebenzi uyabona uJacqueline yena uzabe ejonga this credit agreement. Nina ke wena umsebenzi niye nijonge ntoni na as i-NCC. Mhlawumbe i-issues ezifana nezemisebenzi nezabasebenzi.
Okay, we are introducing that is namalungelo ayi-8. So we are guided by these 8 rights. The right to equity in the market. Right, when we talk about the right to equity, sit umthengi ngamnye xa ifika evenkileni akatreatwe ngofana. Xa ndisiya ndingena, I must not be charged a different price to kuwe. Where you must not be charged. Let's say a hypothetical situation where they look at you, but you only afford 100 rand, but 100 rand. They look at me, but okay, Upumeza looks like she's a bit poor, then she can afford 50 rand. So that's discrimination. Okanye abantu basezilalini bathengisela izongo ezistale. But delivery izongo ezistale whereas abanye bafumana izongo ezifresh. That is discrimination. You discriminating the consumer. You're using geographical location because there's lalin but as long as or you discriminating the consumer by just looking at the consumer. So that is the first one.
All right. It's that some of these things are cropping up. People will complain, but then again, as we've touched on it before, people don't know where to complain. They'll have a different issue, but thinking that the NCC will be able to answer to it, or the NCR will be able to answer to that. You touched on the, I'll come to you now. Now, you touched on the issue of right to equality. Did you want to add on to what Pumeza was saying?
What I wanted to say, though, is with regards to the consumers not knowing where to complain, is the National Credit Regulator engages with all different stakeholders. We engage with the provinces, and different organizations. We discuss mandates, we discuss and we establish referral processes. So even if a consumer approaches, say, the NCC, there should be a referral process in place that they automatically know that in the complaints department, this person is in charge of receiving these types of complaints. So the relationship between the organizations needs to be interchangeable as well, so that they speak to each other continuously, so that even if a consumer approaches the wrong organization, that organization is equipped and knows that this is the person we need to. They can automatically pick up the phone and say, Jackie, we have a consumer that is complaining about their house going on auction. So that relationship needs to be there.
Is that happening now?
Well, from the National Credit Regulator side, we continuously go to the provinces, we engage with all the different stakeholders and the industry bodies. So we are doing that.
Makasichonga amanye amalungelo beqale ngothetha nge-equity, right to privacy, right to choose, right to information disclosure. Sichazele kabanzi.
Sithetha nge-right to privacy. Like, for instance, when we talk about the right to privacy, Act, I'm going to touch upon indaba ye-SMSs. We understand that sometimes sithi sihlele emakhaya sifumane i-SMSs, we are bombarded by SMSs. Someone is marketing this, is selling us this, and abanye abantu ke ngoba fall into traps where they get into schemes and ufumana uba fraudulent schemes, and then imali zabo ziyatyiwa via the SMS. And then ngoku i-Consumer Protection Act introduce into ekuthiwa that regulates amaxesha ethu abantu mabafowunelwe ngawo. Like, for instance, ET Act, sukundifonela during my private time. You can call me in the morning between 8 and 8 in the evening. After 8, it's my family time. Do not call me for marketing purposes. That's number one. On a weekend, you can call me until 1 o'clock. Public holidays, do not contact me at all. It also talks about the establishment of what is called an opt-out register, where eventually when it's up and running, I, as a consumer, will be able to just register my name, and the marketer or whoever is selling wants to sell something to me needs to consult that register and say, is my name on there? Where I've simply said, do not contact me for purposes of marketing at all. So that is the issues that are contained under the right to privacy. And then,
But I mean, it's well and good. We have these laws. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to all of you. It's just too much information. I mean, for a person to say, I need to know when these people need to call me, when not to call me, that's something that's still not out there. Again, I'm coming back to your point, education, education, education.
In this national call center I was talking about, most people will phone one number, 52 million South Africans. And when they phone that number, the 0860 number, 0800, at least the first person they will speak to will be able to advise them what to do. That's the most important thing. The other problem that we're experiencing is that when people go to these agencies, sometimes they get an answer, no, this is out of our jurisdiction. We don't know how to assist you. Now, the problem of what people in some of these agencies, they don't want to go the extra mile. Yeah, so you just say to the person, no, it's not our jurisdiction, go speak to somebody else. I think people who are doing this work, consumer protection, must have a passion for the job. You must be prepared to go the extra mile in assisting people who are in trouble, especially your lowly paid consumers.
All right. For now, let's take another ad break. Please join us after this. Welcome back to Yilungelo Lakho. It's your right, and we continue our conversation with a special focus on consumer rights in South Africa. Are consumers feeling the impact of laws that protect their rights? How can these rights be turned into reality in their lives? Just before the break, we touched on a number of issues, but mostly on the agencies themselves and what you can do to make sure you're more visible. Maybe before I forget this one, I wanted to look, because you touched on the right of privacy, equity, right to choose and all of that. I think the biggest of all still is the issue of information disclosure as well. Butami, I don't know if abantu xa be complain akuni baye bathi bebengaqondi kakuhle ukuba le nto ibithetha ntoni na kwakhona mhlawumbi ibuyele kwi-issue ye-language.
In fact, most of our complaints are related to issues, a lack of understanding, people not understanding information, people not reading my labels, because even now sometimes when I read my labels on some of the products, unzima ukuthi understand ukuthi kukhulunywa ngani la. Language is not simplified, and most of the time it's in English. And the majority of my consumers in South Africa, they don't speak English. They can't read English and understand properly. So the problem ubheka iproblem enkulu abantu mabethenga imoto. It's about information abantu abanikezwe, they don't understand it. People don't understand the interest okufanele ukuthi bayibhadale. Uthola ukuthi abantu bangena kwelezi zinto uma benekweletu, uthola ukuthi umuntu kuthiwa angene kwi-administration. Uthola ukuthi has been paying for 15 years, but the interest is still going up and up. There's a lady who borrowed, I think in 1997 from one of the banks, she borrowed 9,000. Today she's owing 94,000 because of my admin orders, my interest. People simply do not understand. And abantu masabena la wonke lama problems, what do? Bavele bathole because they're afraid ukuthi umphakathi uzobahleka. So issue information is quite critical.
Let's look at consumer understanding of these rights, and their responsibilities as well. Maybe just in your view and what you've picked up from your day-to-day job, where do you think we stand as South Africans when it comes to understanding fully what our consumer rights are?
Well, in terms of the National Credit Act and the complaints that we are receiving, it would seem that consumers are understanding specific rights. There are specific complaints that come through quite often. Obviously, consumers are not aware of their duties in terms of reading the documents or not signing something until you're 100% sure that you understand. If you're presented with a document that's not in your language, don't sign it. Then request that it gets explained to you, or request that you will sign it at a later stage when you have a document in a language that you understand. But it does seem that the consumers do understand their rights, but it may be from the segment of consumers that we're receiving complaints. I mean, in our rurals or whatever, it may not be that they're understanding, and that's why education campaigns go out. We send our complaints officers with, so while we are educating, we are taking the complaints as well. But it's a long road, and you can only take it day by day.
NCC,
a level of understanding, okay, I acknowledge consumer rights as they are presented in the legislation, they are very abstract for a normal person to understand. So it is a responsibility, it is a huge responsibility, in fact, for us as the enforcement agencies to decipher. Once a person on the street where I understand. One way of doing that, identify, in fact, we just completed a set of booklets. It's like a comic strip kind of storyline where we've taken each and every right and broke it down. It's like a father coming back from work, and then TV, and then on TV, and then we take them through the process of how they would, what are the rights in terms of the act, and how they would go out, and then what kind of responses they should expect, returns and refunds, what does the act say about those things, so that it comes alive instead of it being just words in a document. And what we've also done is to take those storylines that we've developed and translated them in all the languages, vernacular languages of South Africa. So this is specifically intended for the rural consumer, so that a rural consumer now begins to get a grasp of exactly what is it that we are dealing with when we're talking about consumer rights. But they are not very easy to understand, the consumer rights.
You are a new baby here,
yes.
But in the programs especially in rural areas, when in those programs, but you need to know whether people are getting what it is that you are trying to do, they understand it. That's more important.
Yeah.
Do you have those targets for yourselves?
Yes. Okay, when I'm saying last year, I'm talking the previous financial year, the first year of existence of the NCC. We had a program called Yilungelo, where we collaborated with Amakos within rural traditional communities. See, very, very deep rural. Consumer rights. So we established, going forward, we want to establish a more permanent relationship with Amakos. Now Amakos is so empowering in a sense that if within a locality experiences the problem, but when systems now in place, the understanding of the Consumer Protection Act, if we call issue prevalent in the area, eventually escalators in problems with National Consumer Commission. So, right. For a rural consumer in terms of imbizo, and then for urban consumer city, where do we catch the urban consumers? Urban consumers, malls, so where we exhibit malls on Saturdays, so that we catch them in the process of buying.
Right.
Because our city, where you advise of your rights as you were buying these goods and services. Here, take this leaflet, go read about it in case you want to return whatever it is that you have bought. And we also partner that by going shop to shop within the shopping malls and distribute the same pamphlets and get to understand what are the challenges that business is dealing with in trying to implement the legislation. To sort of facilitate indaba ye compliance with the legislation.
Ni uthethe kanye kulento yokubana niyakwazi ungena na kwi-malls nithethe nabantu. Ikhona i-issue ke apho abantu funeka bebuyisele ii-goods ne. Umthetho uye uthini kule imeko uyibuyisela xa kutheni na?
I-Consumer Protection Act is specific. We have a right to return the goods as ozithengileyo. If uzithe azasebenza within the first 6 months of operation, at least for 6 months they must work. The supplier must take it back. It is a prerogative of the consumer to either demand a refund or demand an exchange. You can't say as a supplier to the consumer, no, I don't have a no return, no refunds policy in my store. So it is very clear in legislation.
But you still find notices like that.
Those are illegal. They should not be up there.
Are you not then trying to get into these places? Just so that we find ourselves in a place where you don't find such boards. Because I'm telling you right now, we still see those little boards, no refunds, no return.
Remember, this is a well-established culture of consumer abuse. It's going to take a long time for us to get there. But currently now, through our investigation and enforcement, our inspectors are going out actually to businesses to inspect and see and invest and see what is actually happening. The no return refunds signs, are they still up there? Are they disclosing? Can you see copies of your contracts? Are they in plain and simple language? What is happening? So that kind of initiatives, they are taking place as we are speaking.
All right. Butami, kwaboke banalo ulwazi when it comes to these consumer rights. Are we exercising our rights fully?
Yeah, before I answer that question, let me say what is also missing here is an educational program aimed at businesses. Because if businesses are not educated, then these things will take decades to change. So I think we need to develop a program that will be saying to businesses, this is a new legislation aimed at protecting consumers. You've got to exercise it, because if you exercise it, you'll be doing good business and will even generate more profits. So I think that's what we need to do. Now, South Africans by nature are very docile when it comes to protecting their interests, their rights. And you find that most of the time they don't exercise them. It's only when they're experiencing a problem. And I'm talking about even well-educated consumers, right? It's only when they have a problem, that's when they come to you and say, please, I need help. Most of the problems that we have in the market, if people are really exercising their rights, these things will not be happening. And that's where the challenge is, to get consumers to be assertive, to understand that they've got responsibilities to protect their own rights and interests. And if we do that, I think we'll have a much better situation in this country. But we also need to target businesses in our education campaigns.
What do you have to say to that, Jacqueline?
No, I agree 100%. If we think about it, we've said here, these legislations are difficult to understand. And then we bring forth this legislation, we automatically say, you're not complying. But we need to educate the businesses and the registrants to say, this is how you should comply. We have started a new campaign because we did pick up on that, where our compliance officers will go out to our registrants, and if they pick up issues of non-compliance, we'll first try and educate. Obviously, if it's a gross non-compliance, we're going to obviously have to take action. Yeah. But that is the first step. And we get a lot of complaints, and then the credit provider is someone in a rural area, and they really do just want to do good business, and they show remorse, and they say, please could you explain this to me? How can I readdress this? So I do agree with it 100%. We need to educate the people that are providing these services.
All right. Please stay with us. Welcome back. How do we make the progressive consumer rights laws that are well articulated in paper into reality? Well, that's what we're talking about this afternoon. Now, just to sum up everything we've said today, as I said earlier, it's just too much, but there are things you want consumers to remember. I'll start with you, Jacqueline. maybe your advice to consumers?
I think my advice to consumers would be, number one, to read and understand, to ask as many questions as possible. You know, credit agreement is a long agreement, so you need to understand exactly what you're getting yourself into. You need to apply your mind as to, do I need this now? What I always say to consumers is that you should get credit that builds wealth for your family and not just go and splurge on nice items so that you can fit in with the neighbors. Rather save up for those kinds of goods. See if you need something before you just go and sign an agreement which is going to take you 3-4 years to pay off. So I would say that to consumers.
Don't feel pressured as well, I think. That's another point. If you don't understand what's on that contract, find out, ask questions until you understand.
And if you don't understand, you are always welcome to contact the National Credit Regulator and we can explain these things to you.
All right. What time?
Yeah, inkinga enkulu ukuthi abantu mabesenkingeni bathula isikhathi esiningi asithi mhlawumbe umuntu has been failing to keep up with bond payments. And then the bank then says, we're going to be repossessing your house. Uthola ukuthi umuntu then comes to us for advice and help a day before the house is auctioned. So I mean, my advice to consumers is that immediately they realize that they're facing a problem. They must speak out, get in touch with NCC, get in touch with NCCR, and other agencies that are there to protect our consumers. They mustn't wait until it is too late.
Ms. Phumeza, I'm sure you do have education campaigns just to push this information through.
Zininzi the education campaigns where we try and get the messages out there. Like for instance, we want you to invite us, keep on inviting us to shows like this so that abantu bakwazi ukuva ukuthi exactly what is these rights that we're talking about. Ukwenza babazoza babuze more, badige more, bazakuva what is it that needs to be, what is it that we mean when we say consumer rights. And then we also have this consumer clubs that we are in the process of establishing with this goal. Last year, what we started on Nelson Mandela Day, we went out to a primary school where we said, okay, these people, like my fellow panelist was saying, the little children need to grow up to be savvy consumers. Let's not deal with this 10 years from now, 20 years from now. How do we make sure that by the time they are our age, they've got money to spend, they are not falling into these scams and these unfair business processes, that they are vocal, they can advocate for their own rights. Let's go to the school children and make sure that the learning starts as young as possible. And for those that are already at tertiary institutions, at tertiary level, how is it that we can also introduce the concept of consumer protection so that we can cultivate business managers, because those are official leaders that are sensitive to consumer issues, that will protect consumer rights going forward.
All right, thank you very much. We've now come to the end of today's show. We would like to thank our guests for making time to be on the show. Please join us again next Friday for another live consumer topic of the week from 1:30 to 2:30 in the afternoon. And Yilungelo Lakho singadibana ke ngemivulo apha ku-SABC 1 ukususela ke ngo-9:30 kuyotsho ke ngecala emveni kwentsimbi yeshumi. Kindly email your thoughts about this program to consumer@sabc.co.za. Or send us a fax to 011-714-6420 or visit our Facebook page, Yilungelo Lakho, or follow us on Twitter @Yilungelo. Well, from me, Sisanda, Jonas, and the entire team, it's goodbye. Nibe nexesha elimnandi.